So hello, welcome everyone to our last class of the Salon of Classical Architecture of this first season of 2025. We will come back in September, but in the meantime, today we're going to start to do the last class of our program on resources and tools in classical architecture, which is going to be about classical landscapes. So we're going to do a big overview of the history of landscape, and we're going to see what is being done in classical landscapes today, and at the end, as usual, some bibliography. So we are going to see 4 points: brief history of landscaping, contemporary classical landscapers, bibliography, and then the usual miscellanea. So let's start. When we talk about ancient landscape, I think that probably one of the first images that will come to all of you will be these, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. It's a mythical garden. It's one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. We don't know how they look like. We don't know if they actually existed or not, but whether in Babylon or elsewhere, we know that there was something very similar to that. At the same time, the Hanging Gardens have been an element for architects in Western Europe to show, to experiment classical architecture, to experiment with classical architecture and to input their idea. This is an engraving from 17th century by Athanasius Kirchner, where you can see that his approach is, in this case, is completely Baroque. He is like assuming that the gardens in Babylon would be neoclassical, as it was the common belief back then that classical architecture was originated somehow during the 40 years in the wilderness, and then emanated from the temple in Jerusalem to everywhere. That was the theological version of origins of classical architecture, and then you have the Vitruvian version, which is the one that we know from the treatise. But the truth is that maybe not in Babylon, but there were terrace gardens in some parts in Mesopotamia. We have some references. This is, for example, a relief about the gardens of Sennacherib in Nineveh. And as you can see, we have a sort of a hill, and we have some gardens going around. We have some water coming from an aqueduct, very interesting, and then distributing the land, the water that goes down a hill. So, si non è vero, è ben trovato. There was some truth on that. And at the same time, I mean, we know that they were having lavish gardens. I mean, as this is, for example, is this a relief from Iraq that is now in the British Museum, and is showing a banquet of the King Ashurbanipal, where you can see, I mean, it is located in what it looks, it's like sort of pergola. If you see the trunks are supported like a roof, so it's maybe that representing a pergola, and then you have trees in the background. Note the detail here in the corner of a head of a beheaded enemy hanging in a wall as a sort of decorative feature. This is a bit of an introduction. You know that I always like doing a long one so that you get an overview, but a lot of little glimpses. In this case, for time reason, because otherwise we would have stayed for hours, I have omitted all Asian gardens. I am stopping in Persia, but I am not doing anything about India, anything about Japan, anything about China, because otherwise we would be here forever. And I am also not a big expert on Chinese and Japanese gardens. In Egypt, we have the proper origin of the Western garden. And also we keep models and we keep ideas on how these gardens look like. This is a model house, that the typical model houses that they were putting inside the tombs in the Middle Kingdom to show like the house that the deceased would have in his afterlife. And it's a lovely courtyard. You can very clearly see that we have a courtyard with a portico and some trees around. And if we look a little further, we see that there is a pond in the center, and then you have like a porch on the side. This was 4,000 years ago, and the courtyard hasn't changed much since then. The Mediterranean courtyard is still there, and by extension, a lot of American courtyards are still there. You have a fountain, or a small pond, or a small lake, or a pool. Nowadays, everyone wants to have a pool, and then you have like a porch, and then you have the house. So this model hasn't changed, and it's like efficiency is proof through its use through so many years. But this is not the only source that we have about gardens in Egypt. Obviously, we have a lot of frescoes showing us how the gardens of the wealthy were. And they are very similar to what you could see in the model. You have the house, and then we have a pond on one side, and then we have trees surrounding them. We also know that Tutmosis III had a botanical garden in one of his temples, and these reliefs show a bit the type of plants that were there, and the animals and some objects. So this bird is sitting on a sort of base, so very, very, very interesting. And we also know how they work. We also know as well that the way they work is very similar to the way that traditional Egypt has been working until very recently. Only the aesthetic has changed, but the functionality and the techniques have remained the same. So this is from 3,000 years ago, 3,000 and a half years ago, 35 centuries ago. And you can see, I mean, you still have a dog, the best companion of the human being, and a man picking up some water from the river or from a pond using a very primitive well that is still in use in many parts of the world, and the house with a portico around. A very important person in ancient Egypt, as judging for what he says in his tomb, etc., was Senefer. Senefer was the manager of one of the gardens of the pharaoh. And in his tomb, he very proudly showed the garden that he had in there. And the tomb is called the Tomb of the Vines, and we're going to see now why. But as you can see, we have a very well structured garden. We have an enclosure around, we have an entrance accessible through the river because the Nile was like the road that was connecting everything in Egypt. And then we have like an orderly array of elements. We have um, something like a palace in here where you can do several things, sitting down, pray, do nothing. And then we have some lakes, a structure around. So, and then a center part that seems to have vineyards, or at least like a sort of ivy covering. It was probably vineyards. And then you have the lake with some ducks. So it's a very well ordered garden that then we're going to see more about it in the future. But this is the first time we're seeing the garden arranged in an orderly array. We have seen some of them before, but the size of these is quite prominent. No? Before we have seen just the trees around a pond. Here we're seeing four ponds and a central area. And his tomb is called the Tomb of the Vines because the whole ceiling is decorated with painted vines in a lovely manner, and that's what it is considered that. And probably there was a lot of vines in the garden he was in charge of. Here we have another one from the Tomb of Nebaboom, and again we can see a lot of fruit trees because we see this lady here gathering the fruit and putting them in baskets, and then again like a very rich pond with fishes and ducks and a lot of vegetation. Usually these gardens were close to the river, and when the Nile was flooding, the the ponds will get flooded with the Nile. They wouldn't fight against the floods, the annual flood that the Nile had every year. These gardens would be not destroyed, but covered with semi-destroyed every year, and then refurbished every year, and then some of them will have other mechanism, but normally that was the way because it was also a way to purify the garden. From here, we're going to jump into Greece and Rome, and we're going to very briefly talk about the Greek garden because the Greeks, they didn't have much elaborated gardens. They had some of it, but the gardens were very austere. They were very natural. They were very spontaneous. They were not manicured garden. Although we have examples of Greek gardens that were more or less structured in one way or another. This is, for example, the case of the garden around the Temple of Hephaestus in Athens, where when they started doing the excavation, they discovered that there were like areas around the tree, and they found the stumps and roots perfectly aligned with the columns around, and then like a hedge around the temple. So meaning that in some way or other there was a row of trees uh, continue surrounding the temple, and then another hedge surrounding it. And here you can see a better view, a bit of a more recent photograph where it has been restored to its more archaeological accuracy, in which you can see the shrubs, which were probably trees, aligned, or what that will become trees in due course, that were aligned with the columns. However, despite that, the Romans took from the Greek the idea of a garden within the house, the famous peristylium in the Roman house, and we can see a lot of peristylium in Pompeii because obviously they have stayed intact, but in other places, I mean, the building was destroyed and things were built over. But in Pompeii, everything remained as it was the day of the destruction, the day of the eruption. So it's very easy because what you have is burnt ashes and petrified or carbonized wood. It's very easy to recognize which were the species that they were having, and then rebuild the garden as they were. That's the house of the Menander. This is the house of the Betty, and again, because the plants were growing in a certain way and they got carbonized, we know very well the path that all these plants were following. Even if that's not the case, we're going to see now a case in Britain where they managed to understand how the parterres look like. Rome had a lot of gardens around. They were called hortus, like farm, like a small orchard. But they were properly gardens that normally they were property of wealthy people that ended up donating them. And some of them are around where the maximum the maximum concentration was around Mons Pincium, where nowadays you have Villa Medici and the Monte Pincio and the Pincio Gardens. And the last example I'm bringing from Rome is Fisbon Roman Palace in UK. I am bringing it because it's very far from what you would expect to find a Roman palace, but there it is. And you can see here that there is a sort of parterre following circles and squares, circles and square. We know that that was the pattern because when they excavated, they found that there were like a different type of earth put on its side. There was a more neutral ground with drainage in the area that is with the flattened earth, and then there was a much more organic area around there, and then with a richer substrate to allow for the bushes, and then a central part which was more like fields. So it's very likely that the structure was like that. And you can see here this is the if we go back to the picture, this road is here, and this area that you can see here is this part of the palace. Well, all this other part is covered with these houses. And this is like a view of the palace with the parterres and some like idealized thing about how a further landscape may have looked like. This was a massive. This was one of the biggest. This is the biggest Roman building in Britain, and one of the biggest ones outside Italy. It was supposed to be done by a local Celtic chief soon after the conquer of Rome by Claudius. And just to finalize, we cannot forget the painted gardens, the painted walls, the painted nature that appears in many, many frescoes in Pompeii, but not only in Pompeii and wherever the frescoes have been replicated. This is a constant. This representation of a garden is a constant for many of houses. I think that all these cubicles, the cubicula, they were very dark. So painting a garden would add like a very nice touch of happiness and nature inside them. And we know from the frescoes, we know some ideal arrangements that could be part of a reality. It could also be fantasy of the fresco artist. Now, all this art of landscaping, which reached in Roman times, it reached more or less the same levels that it could have reached during the Renaissance. It started to fade during the Middle Ages because There is not so much money, there is not so much intention to continue, but there is still a garden in the Middle Ages. A concept that will appear a lot, very, very constant, is the ortus conclusus, meaning the ortus conclusus comes from a versicle in the Bible, and what it is telling you is like an enclosed garden that is manicured and where you retire to pray or to play music or to just relax. And that's like your divine space to stop, to detract from the world, and to start doing to meditate and to pray and to thank God for whatever you had or what you didn't have or you wanted to have. And as you can see, I mean, this garden looks a bit random, but it has like a parterre here, it's walled, and the trees seem to be more or less structured. Plus, you have like a well and a table in here. So we are not talking about a wilderness. In others, this is from 15th century, we are starting to see some more boxes where plants are grown. We have like a trellis around to divide the area around the fountain and the area around this. This would probably what in Middle Ages was called a potager, which is a kitchen garden. Nowadays it's called kitchen garden. In French, they still call it potager. It's basically like a garden where you would grow things that you would eat, from herbs to vegetables. And as you can see, I mean, we have a fountain, and then it's taking you, the fountain has a channel that is going somewhere. So I think that the idea is that there is a design in here. Or this other one that is actually showing us like a very beautiful trellis where roses are growing, and we have like an entrance and two little windows for this lady to sit down and enjoy the peace in her ortus conclusus. And another one, this was more associated with the idea of praying to Virgin Mary. We have like a perfectly enclosed courtyard with a fountain and a geometric pattern where you could go and you could use the geometry to reflect about the divinity of Virgin Mary. And on a similar note, most of the monasteries, who were the holders of the culture in the Middle Ages, would have a garden, whether in the cloister or a kitchen garden associated to the kitchen, you could have it. And the plan of St. Gallen from 7th century or 8th century is showing us already a cloister in here that has some sort of fountain or a gazebo in the center, some sort of intention. And you can see here an idealized reconstruction of the monastery according to that plan. And this is like a medievalistic reconstruction of a cloister and of a cloister garden. This is in New York. This is a cloister that they bought from Spain. They dismantled it and they rebuilt it there in New York, and it's called nowadays the Cloister Museum. But this is probably the look of the medieval garden. It was a potager, very practical, some trees, some minimal ordering, but that ordering it wasn't done for beauty, it was done for functional purposes. The next level will come during the Renaissance. But before, we are going to do a quick insight on the Islamic garden. The Islamic garden, there is no such a thing as an Arab garden because the Arabs lived in the desert, they didn't have water, so for them it was impossible to think about a garden. In the best case scenario, you could enjoy an oasis and that's it. So when they started expanding and they conquered Syria, which was super fertile area, and they conquered Egypt, of course, they found that super scarce resource that they have, the water, is present everywhere outside the world. So they would be there is a lot of literature praising water, and there will be a constant fascination of water between the Muslims. And that is because the scarcity of water in the times of the Prophet. So these mosaics, which could perfectly be a Roman mosaic, a Roman fresco in Pompeii or in the Domus Aurea, is actually in Syria, in Damascus, in the Great Umayyad Mosque. So this was done around during 8th century, heavily restored over the years, but the original parts are from 8th century. And what are we seeing here? We are not seeing a city. We're seeing more like a small exedra, like a gallery, portico, etc., with surrounded by trees. So they're trying to sell us the appeal of this real or imaginary place. And on that regard, this is something that they insist a lot. That sometimes we have the feeling that because that's how the way it has been romanticized, that even the architecture in the Middle Ages didn't have any architecture, didn't have any order. No, it is a bit like the builders were arriving, were putting the stones one on top of the other, and then boom, just by divine inspiration, they supported the cathedral. No, and same with Arab architecture. No, these guys were excellent craftsmen. Each of them would start in one side of the mosque, carving their staff, and then they would magically merge. And that's not the case. There was a heavy planning, and I'm bringing here these illustrations of the gardens of Babur in Afghanistan because it's one of the very scarce sources where we see someone with a plan. Islamic representation of someone in the Islamic world carrying a plan, which is this guy with this red rectangle. This is supposed to be the like, Sultan, and the guy with the yellow coat is Babur, showing to the Sultan how the garden is being built. And then you can see that there are the workmen around that are still working on the garden. It's like a royal visit to see the progress of the site. But I mean, it's interesting because you have that representation of the Sultan or the authority holding a map, which is very important because it's telling us that these peoples that the architect drew the garden first, so that the Sultan, when they go, they could understand it. And as you can see as well, we have like a cross. This is very important because that will be the Islamic garden is a representation of paradise. And the paradise, according also to the Bible, is where four rivers converge: the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Nile, and the Tiber. In some cases, these the two last rivers, normally the Tigris and the Euphrates, are always there. The more you go to Western Europe, you find the Nile and the Tiber. The more you go to Eastern Europe, you might find the Ganges and the Indus or similar ones, just to show the confluence of all of them. And here it's one typical Persian garden. That's where I mean, we're in Persia, we're finishing in Spain. There is a lot of also gardens like that in Syria, but they have disappeared. While in Persia, because they have been a bit more stable over the years, they have been kept and well maintained, and you can still visit them. And this is the concept that I was talking about, the crossbow garden. You have like two perpendicular directions of water that intersect in one point in the center of the courtyard, and then the water is supplied from two little fountains that are within prominent areas in the long facades of the building. So you are creating the beginning and the ending of the river in this representation of the world. This or following that idea, so for you to show you more examples, we have the crossbow gardens in Medina Sahara, which was the Palatine city of the Umayyads in Spain. And you can see how they cross, and in the crossing there is a pavilion, or there is a water feature, or there is something relevant in there. And here you have the aerial photograph. And again, because the whole city was destroyed at once in 19th century, in the 11th century, at the beginning of 11th century, it was very easy to recover things because what happened is that everything was plundered and the gardens were covered in rubble. So it was very easy once you were taking out the rubble to see which plants had been grown, and wherever that was not possible, you just excavate and you get it. Another typology of different one, because this is linear, is the courtyard of the doncells of the maids in the Alcazar of Sevilla. In this case, it comes with a very interesting variation, which is a dig courtyard. People were not aware that this courtyard existed up until 19 early 2000s, up until early 2000s, where they changed the marble of the courtyard, and then they decided to do some excavation, and they found that it's very strange that it is solid in the center, solid on the sides, and then there is earth in the in between. Let's keep excavating, and then they found this with this wonderful arcade and they just rebuilt it and planted orange trees. It was the typical thing that you would grow there. And the whole thing of doing that is to allow you to grab the orange trees without having to use a ladder or anything like that. And on that same tradition, we have the Generalife Garden in Granada, talking us about the same idea of hedonistic pleasure with the water. And in this case, the cross thing has disappeared and it's only linear fountain. Any question till now? Remember that you can use the chat if you don't want to write. Okay, let's continue with the Renaissance gardens. In the Renaissance, obviously, I mean, we all know that there is a great interest in recovering back Greece and Rome, especially Rome, and Treatise will be read, but not only Vitruvius. We have some letters from Pliny, some letters from other Romans talking about their own gardens. So they would be very obsessed in trying to replicate those gardens according to those letters with minor or less success, but at the same time incorporate the ideas of the Renaissance to it. Like for example, Alberti would say that the garden should be in a increasing slope, but gentle enough so that you don't realize that you're going up. But then you could turn back in at any moment and say, "Oh wow, this is the view that I have." And in this regard, I mean, one I wanted to start with this painting by Frangelico, the Annunciation, where you can see a very well manicured fence and then a little bit of a semi-wild garden. No, I'm sure that this was done on purpose by Frangelico to show how gardens looked like back then, with probably a plenty of natural flowers. A book that was very, very important conceptually to mark the Renaissance garden is his book Hypnerotomachia Polyphili, The Dream of Polyphilus, which just basically tells you that it's a guy called Polyphilus who has a dream and he goes to visits several architectural allegories and different architectural places to see that and has different adventures. So the heavy symbolism was very inspiring for the Renaissance people. And this is one of the very few urban examples that Alberti designed, the city of Pienza. Pienza was a town, a village called Corsignano, and that was the Pope Pius II was born. So when he became Pope, he decided to upgrade his city. He converted it into a cathedral city and ordered Alberti to remodel the city. And Alberti did the square with the cathedral and the palace. And at the same time, he didn't want them to have more importance than the other. So he put like a big garden to the side so that to say, okay, you have the garden facing your dominions, but the public space is still shared with the church. And this is the garden that you can see from there. It's still like very Greek and very medieval in its approach, probably in the in-between about the hedges. You had a potager. So it's still very medieval in its approach. One of the very first properly Renaissance ones will be Villa Madama, built by Rafael Sanzio. And Rafael would want to emulate and replicate here the architecture of the Romans. So this is a properly Roman building. He only managed to do half of it, but you can see in what we consider from the drawings, it was a very, very good, well done design. So this is what the villa looks like nowadays. As you can see, half of it. You can see a half and the other half. And from there, from that ordered manicured garden, we start moving towards something more dramatic. Still ordered, but dramatic. And this is the Manierist garden. In this case, the one I'm bringing here is the Gardens of Boboli in Palazzo Pitti, where you have to pay a separate entrance when you enter, but it's an amazing Mannerist garden done with all the twists that you could imagine to the classical language proper of the Mannerists. Very, very interesting to see. And in that same lane of twisting and creating something quirky and big, you have the Sacro Bosco. The Sacro Bosco, this is Sacro Bosco in Bomarzo by Vignola, and it's a series of big follies, big strange sculptures and architecture, giants, animal, lizards, buildings that seem to be falling apart, churches, temples that look like a miniature. So everything is too big or too small or it's going to fall, and it's all done to please and to impress the visitor. I'm talking about impress. This is the Isola Bella in Lake Maggiore in Italy, and this is just one of the idealized reconstruction of the Hanging Gardens in Babylon that were done by the end of 16th century once the debates were calming down. And which were the local variants that we had in the Renaissance? In England, you start to have a manicure garden called the knot garden, which is trying to emulate the knots that you have in Celtic and medieval designs. In France, we will start to see again similar knot gardens, and also we will start to see how the potager, the kitchen garden, gets bigger and more manicured, and that this will be the beginning of what we will see in some minutes about the Baroque garden. And in Spain, at the same time, we continued with the Islamic tradition and incorporate all the principle of geometry to the Renaissance. This is a garden in the palace of Rivera family in Bornos in southern Spain. And you can see a very beautiful arcade inspired directly in Serlio, fourth book. And it's quite a beautiful and amazing example of Renaissance in southern Spain, where everything is combined. The Islamic influence is combined with a new approach coming from Italy. I'm going to make a quick stop on the Spanish Baroque garden because we have one of the most striking. Still half of it is built, half of it is standing, and there is and the park, the old garden is part of a park now. Is the Retiro Palace, which its gardens are now part of the Retiro Park. Well, all the gardens are part of the Retiro Park. It was a pleasure palace designed just outside Madrid for the king to be able to spend a weekend or sometime out of the city, but still close enough to the court without having to go to El Escorial or all the places miles away. And this is like an overimposition of how the palace was a massive palace. You can see how all the points will be inserted down, and you can see as well that this area of the palace has been now occupied by buildings, and then after that is when the proper Retiro Park starts. And at the same time, with a continuation of the Islamic tradition, but in this case completely classified. I have brought this is the hospital, or this is sort of hospital for retired priests in Sevilla. And this feature that you see, the fountain at the bottom of a hole, it's a very common feature that you have in many courtyards in Andalusia, because it was allowing you to have water even if the water table was very low. You could still be able to get some water. And yeah, that's a bit the beautiful idea of the Spanish Baroque garden. Now we're moving towards what you all imagine is the French formal garden. And we cannot talk about the French formal garden without talking about André Lenotre, who was the landscape architect for Louis XIV. He was the architect of Versailles, but not only Versailles, he did a lot of the landscape architecture for many of the French palaces. This is Chateau de Chantilly, so for the Bourbon Condé. And again, he did like an amazing work. This is the Orangerie in Versailles. So this is also an accessible area. This is the area where the king would have the orange trees. They would be out in this parterre during spring and summer, and then from autumn onwards, the pots will be brought down to protect them from the cold. And the principles of Lenotre will be big avenues and very formal axis and parterres. So it's a very formal architecture, very big and monumental. And that architecture would be exported to Spain once the Bourbons come. And this is I have brought here as an example the Palace of La Granja in Segovia, where you can see that we have several levels. We have a big axis aligned with the facade, but the other two side bodies also have an alignment, and then we have another starting to get informal garden alignment, but all of them very, very manicured and structured. As an opposition to the English, to the French landscape garden, we have the English landscape garden. And again, the same way that we have to talk about Lenotre in the French, we have to talk about Lancelot Capability Brown for the English garden. Mr. Brown took his nickname Capability because whenever he was visiting his clients, he was used the word capability to define the possibilities that the garden. He would say, "Oh yes, sir, your garden has capabilities to improve, to be improved." So Lancelot Brown was always talking about improving the gardens, and obviously him getting a fee for doing so. And he's the inventor of what we know more about the wilderness garden. I have some examples, but not only wilderness, but also the picturesqueization of the garden. This is Wentworth House in UK, and this is after his improvements. You have almost all the same elements, but you have in this case added a lake, a bridge to increase the wilderness. And on his idea, on his consideration, he thought that he was improving nature by making things more natural. Well, actually, what he was doing is spending a lot of money from their clients to make look things like they had never done anything on them. So I think that his career has been a bit difficult in that sense. But perhaps one of the big inventions from Capability Brown is the so-called the haha. The haha, as you can see, is a wall that prevents animal to access where you are, but still keeps the view. So if you were building a wall, you would have a visual barrier as well as physical. If you put the haha, you have a physical barrier, but not an acoustic barrier or a visual barrier, which in some cases is very important, especially if you want to ensure and enhance the views. And together with that architecture would come what it is called the follies. The follies are like capricious architecture that grow around the parks, and they can be any style, from classical to Gothic. So they can be. This is an emulation of the Rialto Bridge by Palladio. This is a sort of a Gothic temple. So all the architecture of Gothic with CK it will be very, very suitable for follies. And then eventually, once the neo-Gothic movement starts to take momentum, the follies will turn back into neoclassical or into Chinese or into Arabic. And then by the end of 19th century, they will disappear from many properties. But that's the way they operate. And as well as part of Capability Brown's strategies, he also used to build fake bridges, sham bridges. And this is in Kenwood House in London. And when you are there, you see that bridge and you see, oh, it's a very nice bridge. I want to cross it. And then you walk and you walk and you walk. And then you see a bridge, like half a kilometer between 500 and a kilometer after that thing. And then you see that you're crossing the bridge because it's very similar. But no, that bridge, if you look carefully, is a fake bridge. It's completely false on the other side. And it has been like that since 18th century. It was just an optical effect to look like you have a bridge from the house. And of course, even if it is not English, we cannot talk about this capricious garden architecture without talking about the Marie Antoinette farm in Versailles. This farm was built for Marie Antoinette in the 1780s when she was starting to get bored of the ceremony of Versailles. And in order to solve that, initially, King Louis XVI, he gave her the Petit Trianon, but that was not enough. She wanted to live like a farmer and to live like in nature. So she got built this one, this farm. And despite being the farm for a queen, where she would do butter by in porcelain buckets, and they would be. It's a legend that apparently the first time she went, there were cows, live cows around, and Marie Antoinette was scared of the cows and displeased with the cow poo. And then, but at the same time, she liked the idea of having cows and cows poo around because she thought it was natural, despite disliking it. So what did they do? Very 18th century French style solution. They desiccated the cows, so they were taxidermic cows moving on the distance over on wheels, and the poo will be Sevres porcelains poos. I think that from time to time you find them in antiquarian shops and shows because they're super scarce because they were all destroyed in the French Revolution. But it was like a refined eschatological object art. So we are leaving the illustration, we're leaving all the rationality of the pre-romantic times, and we're entering properly into the romantic gardens. So the romantic gardens are also the gardens that we experience more. We hardly experience medieval gardens. We don't experience, unless we go to Pompeii, a Roman garden, definitely not an Assyrian or Egyptian garden. It's you can experience some French gardens, but they need to be, they're usually in big palaces outside the cities, and the English gardens are in big country states outside the city. So the real garden that we approach nowadays, which is the park, the urban park, is normally a romantic garden. And I like bringing this image in Versailles because it's the contrast that will drive around the Mediterranean, the romantic garden, and that is what will the double balance in which move will move from a total version of nature much more exaggerated than that of calm nature from Capability Brown, and the neoclassical order inspired in this small temple and this small folly. The romantic garden during 19th century will transform gardens that are semi-formal gardens like this, the Bois de Boulogne, into this. This is the same area. In France, you can see a little bit here. The Seine is somewhere here. You see this island here is this island here. So we are respecting some of the axes that were existing, but then you create just a series of very curvy paths just to create some fun and to control. So it's like the same idea that the English garden had about creating a wild landscape. The French create a wild landscape that is deliberately tamed, while the English garden is apparently not tamed. Both of them are really tamed, but this French romantic garden is actually telling you, hey, this is manicured. This is a human created space. While the English garden, the Capability Brown garden, it's more like I have created a, a garden that looks like natural, but it's not natural. Well, the French will tell you this is not natural at all. And Hyde Park as well. I mean, there was a project, very interesting. There's a small booklet dedicated to that. If you're interested, I can show you. This is London before this is Haussmann before Haussmann. There was a guy in middle 18th century who wanted to regularize the plan of London in a similar way that Haussmann did. And as you can see, for example, here at the bottom, he wanted to build a new Houses of Parliament. Buckingham Palace, which should be here, has been transformed here into what it was St. James's Palace, because Buckingham Palace back then was nothing. And this is Hyde Park, for those of you who have been in London. And then all this area is around Piccadilly. Trafalgar Square is here, and Covent Garden is somewhere here, and Oxford Street is here. So that is the Piccadilly and Regent Street haven't been built yet, but it's regularizing. It's like an anecdote. It happened actually later. It is from the 1760s, so it's very interesting because it's probably the only approach that Britain had to a Haussmannian urbanism 100 years before Haussmann started to do the surgery into Paris. But this project of perfectly ordered Hyde Park ended up converting in this. So this is the romantic garden, and this is the controlled garden. Eventually, Hyde Park, all this area here will get very manicured, what it is called nowadays the Italian gardens, but the rest will just grow wild. And when you go to Hyde Park and you walk in Hyde Park, if you walk enough inside the park, you stop seeing any buildings around. You really feel that you are in the middle of a forest. And of course, we cannot talk about the romantic garden without talking about Central Park. In New York, Central Park was initially supposed to be done much to the south in the first commissioner's plan, but when it was not respected, because initially New York was supposed to have much more, a lot of small squares, a lot of small parks, but when they realized that they were not doing it, they were just building, 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 then they decided to leave a massive space in the center of the city to have a massive park, basically the only park in the city. There are other small squares here and there, but the only real length of the city is that. I mean, as opposed to other cities that have a lot of small parks around, New York has only that. Manhattan has only that. So it was the only place where New Yorkers back then could go and enjoy some sort of nature. And this idea of the romantic garden would also come inside the squares. If you recognize this area, this is the Plaza Mayor in Madrid. And you see, I mean, this is something that when people see it, they get shocked, no? Because now the Plaza Mayor is completely different. But back in 19th century, it was a manicured garden, so as almost like a romantic garden. And then in the 1930s, to allow for the trams to pass, the because the Plaza Mayor was converted into a sort um, of tram park to centralize the services in there. So the garden was removed. And then later on, when the trams were taken out, it would be used as a parking space. And then the parking would be built under the square to liberate the square for the public. But then after that, you couldn't plant anything. One day they should think about planting back. It shouldn't be so difficult. And the last one we're going to see here about the romantic garden is Jean-Claude Nicolas Forestier. Forestier is the last of the big landscape architects in the romantic style. He's French. His way of thinking, his formation is completely French, but most of his work was done in Spain and Latin America. He did the master plan for Havana, one of the biggest parks in Havana. It was him who designed it. And you can see that there is a mix. There is like one step back from the very romantic concept of the garden with the sinuous pathways. They are still there, but the axes are coming back. But they are not. But they're coming back in a much more unordered manner, much more random manner than they did before. So it's a mix of both things. And another one that is very famous, that if you are from southern Spain, you obviously know this, which is the Maria Luisa Park in Sevilla, done for the exhibition of 1929, and still mostly as it was back then, with the only difference that when it was built, the park was designed more as a park without many trees, more flowers, but then eventually trees started to grow and other trees have taken over the flowers. So that's why sometimes when you look at old paintings and old pictures of the Maria Luisa Park, you see a lot of flowers and now you don't see them because obviously with the shades, it's more difficult for them to grow. But as you can see, it's a mix of order. We have some big avenues, and then we have some capricious areas here. So that's more the romantic garden that Forestier creates and became very successful model because it integrates both. You have a little bit of manicured garden and a little bit of wilderness. And we're going to see in the bibliography some books that you will find very useful for that. And then the whole park is very evocative. It has become an icon of Sevilla and an icon of Andalusia. It's full of very ordered spaces like this one that you can see here, the so-called Plaza de America, with the Archaeological Museum and the Art and Craft Museum, and then a music pavilion. But then just behind this building, there is a lake with this. So it's mixing the idea of a very romantic random garden with the formality of a French garden. And I know that some of you are from Brazil, and I wanted to bring some examples from America so that you see that you also know how to appreciate your heritage and the beautiful thing that you have in America, because sometimes people think that America is only modernist, especially because modernism was so successful in Mexico and in Brazil that it has overshadowed all the rich architectural tradition that you have. And I'm bringing here as an example the Parque Lage in Rio de Janeiro, which is very beautiful. Obviously, it has been eaten by the vegetation and the jungle, but it's a very, very French dash Italianate idea of a garden in a lush vegetation. And one that is still serving as a park is very beautiful, and everyone loves it in San Diego is the Balboa Park, which was done for the Panama exhibition in 1917, and it's still there. It's a mix of a Spanish style of what the Americans call Spanish revival styles, a mix of New Spain Baroque and Southern Spanish Baroque that creates a feast for the senses, and it's really really beautiful to visit. Just a small note about the Edwardian gardens. During the Edwardian times, they would, I'm not going to say get tired, but they would detract a bit from the big garden schemes, and they would come down to try to find something genuinely British. That something genuinely British wasn't going to be a recreation of the Knot Garden and the medieval garden that the art and craft movement was doing at that time. It wasn't going to be a French neoclassical garden. It wasn't going to be either a Capability Brown landscape garden. It was going to be the three of them at the same time. So this is a garden done by but the founder of the movement, Gertrude Jekyll, who was an intimate collaborator with Lutyens, the first also landscape woman landscape architect in UK, and she designed gardens like this. They became a feature, like the sort of sunken garden. This will become a feature in Edwardian architecture because the same way that the cross garden in the Islamic architecture is adding you extra moisture because you are digging down and building the soil or at a lower level, meaning closer to the water table. This would keep things fresher and would allow the gardens to grow lavishly, even in the hottest of the summers, for the standard of the time. Now, with the very hot summer that we're having now with the, in UK these years, these gardens need extra care or they just perish. But back then, with the temperatures of the early 20th century, they could just stay on their own. Before we jump onto contemporary classical landscape designers, any question? Any comment?
What was the name of the lady you mentioned who drew these Edwardian gardens?
Gertrude Jekyll. I'm going to write it in the chat.
Thank you.
Gertrude Jekyll, like Dr. Jekyll. Okay, let me just put a link to her bio in Wikipedia. So very interesting because she wrote a lot about it's a more domestic scale, and we will see in the bibliography what I think is the best book that you can use nowadays for landscape design. Okay, Lara is asking why is the bridge false? Just to give the fact that you have a nice bridge without having to actually build one. That's the only reason. So he did the bridge because when you are in the house, you cannot see the actual bridge. It's too far and it's covered with vegetation. So that you could see the bridge from the house, he built a false bridge to enhance the idea of the landscape and the hidden thing, etc. It's the same way that Lenotre and the French landscapers would create enormous avenues and very long axes. What Capability Brown would do is just destroy everything so that everything looks natural. But it would create a lot of fake things that were actually very expensive. People were very critic back in time to Capability Brown. Then he became a sort of national hero. And only recently they are started to put, okay, he was a master, but he was also a trickster. He was also making his clients invest massive amount of fortune on demolishing and removing They are manicured gardens that were typical from the very first half of 18th century and late 17th century, and turned them into something that was pretending to be natural but wasn't natural at all. And I put Gertrude Jekyll because all the landscape designers that we're going to see now, they are, except in the first one, they are all active. Arabella Lennox Boyd, who is the first one we're going to see, she's very old, she's retired. But all the other ones are active nowadays, and you can check their website and see them on YouTube, read articles from them. It's very interesting, and all of them are coming from the tradition of the Edwardian and the late Romantic garden. So they are not Lenotre, they are not Capability Brown, they are more Gertrude Jekyll. We will see Reginald Blomfield, Forestier, all that sort of architects. So we're going to see some of them for your inspiration. So this is some gardens from Arabella Lennox Boyd. She was very active up until the early 2000s. And you see, I mean, there is a clear similarity with Gertrude Jekyll. There is a mix as well of very manicured elements like these bushes and these pyramids, these topiary pyramids, and then like some wilderness that's very characteristic of the Edwardian garden. And as well, again, like a mix of some small axis area or ordered area with the two fountains and a very regular pavement and a very regular parterres, and then but then the flowers are growing wild inside them. So it's this mix that I am telling you about. Jean Mus is a landscape architect based in southern France. He's one of the best if you need to do a Provençal Dutch Mediterranean garden. He's your best choice to go for, and he does amazing works. Not only this is a sort of pseudo Chinese or Chinoiserie garden in southern France. This is not a garden. This is a terrace in the Ritz in Paris, and you see all this wonderful use of the trellis, which is a feature that is very characteristic of all these manicured gardens. And I'm leaving you a book at the end to learn more about trellis, or something more calm with an axis and trees either side, and then create it like a small vista around. Well, it obviously looks that the rest of the garden is structured in different parts. So we are not talking about a great scheme, but we're not talking either about a random scheme. So it's like pockets, little pockets of order within a more natural background. This other one, Janice Parker, she's in the United States. She's very good. She has got several awards, a lot of videos. She's very fun to listen. So read her interviews, watch her interviews. She's super amusing and really easygoing, really nice to hear. And she's very good at communicating what she does. And I'm bringing one of the examples of the houses that she designed the gardens, and you can see that it's like a little pocket of order around the wilderness of nature. And we will see the book that explains a little bit about that. And then we have like a sort of an etc. A lot of manicured garden. This is probably a kitchen garden or a potager. I mean, because I have worked with her, and she includes that as part of sort of sustainability area for the garden. So all the area around the kitchen won't be only flowers, it will also be vegetables. And then a tennis court, in this case, very nicely hidden with hedges, but it could be done in other ways. Or this beautiful sitting area, sitting arrangement with this etc. Some sort of topiary, some plants, very ordered, very subtle, but at the same time very classical in its approach. These other ones we're going to see, Richard Myers is based in London. Again, very nice person. You can see a lot of interviews from him on YouTube. He likes talking about gardening. He likes talking about how to design. And I recommend you to see. I mean, he moves, I would say, I think he sometimes wants to be more contemporary, but he's always rooted into the proper English classical tradition with a hint of some French and some manicure knotted gardens, as you can see in this one. But also this mix of elements. It's not like a grand scheme, the style of Lenotre. It's more like little pockets of ordered stuff around the wilderness. or this other one, which where you can see the same. You have like an axis taking you to the forestry, but then before you get into the forestry, we have like a very ordered area, but in between the flowers grow in a very random, natural way. Another one, very important one that it's still alive, as a really big office, writes a lot of articles, is Randall Sidley, and he comes from a sort of dynasty of artists and architects, and he's a landscape designer. This is a new house, and he designed all this garden here, and you can see it has like two elements. You have like a more manic. It goes in stages. You have like more the wild area that you were still growing crops. You have a little vestibule. Then you have a very perfectly manicured garden in here, aligned with the courtyard of the house. And then you go to the back garden, where it still starts to get a bit more wild until you enter into the grassland. So it's a very, very subtle way of organizing different spaces. A small detail with the trellis to, because sometimes the trellis have a mirror to try to duplicate the space and to reflect light, which is a very nice effect. And a very simple fountain, but at the same time very classical and effective. You don't need to put everywhere you go a Versailles fountain. You just need to put a decently designed, nice fountain. And one of the last ones we're going to see here, Francois Goffinet, Belgium, very good. He has done mix modern and classical, but where he is really good is at the classical design. You see, the modern ones, and they are a bit dual, and they are still classical in their approach. But here, wherever he does, this garden was finished very recently because it was started in 2018, and it looks like it has been always there. It looks much more medieval and Renaissance than many others, but that's he's trying to do like a contextual approach, and at the same time incorporate all the traditions that the client wanted to incorporate. And you see here another view of it with these wonderful fountains, and then some of the edges that are created like two axes, and you have like one taking you to facing you to the belfry, in this case to the church you enter on the side, so that this is not a proper main facade. But you have here a sequence of spaces again that go from more manicure to more wild, and then boom, you go into the wilderness. And one of the most beautiful gardens actually nowadays in UK, Highgrove Gardens, which is the residence of the king. It's one of the king gardens. When he was Prince of Wales, he was manicuring and taking a lot of care of this garden that actually is self-sufficient. It produces a lot of food and marmalades and what's the honey and gin, etc. And then that helps to support the the state. I mean, actually, if you want to give a very posh Christmas box, don't go to Fortune and Mason, go to Highgrove. The quality is much better than Fortune and Mason, and Fortune and Mason is already very good. And we're coming to the bibliography. We are going to see several books that I think they will be very useful for you when if you ever need to approach landscape design. And if not, they're still good to read to know how to have to interact, or what you should be expecting from a landscape designer when you work with them. The first one, which I think is very important, is The Formal Garden in England by Reginald Blomfield. Don't get fooled by the title, because Blomfield is talking about the garden in England. But once you take a look at the contents of the book, you have the formal method and the landscape gardener. So you have 20 pages to explain how the garden interacts with the landscape. Then you have actually 3 chapters to talk about the formal gardens in England. But then you have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other chapters to talk about the elements of the garden and the architecture of the garden. And that is what the juice of the book. Because it looks like he's going to talk about Lenotre. He doesn't talk about Lenotre. He's talking about the same thing that Gertrude Jekyll will talk later on, but Gertrude Jekyll would focus much more on the gardening part, on the vegetables, on the biology, on the flora, and the fauna, and the natural part of the proper nature within the garden rather than the architecture in the garden. So that's why Blomfield is really, really good to read. And you can, of course, all the books that I recommend are always at archive.org. This one by Humphrey Repton is very interesting because it will settle you, it will help you to understand the ideas behind, because Repton is like a disciple of Capability Brown. I have brought it because it's an attempt to put a theory behind Capability Brown's crazy designs. So that's why it is important to read it. This one hints at landscape design by Prince von Pockler Muskow. It's this one of these German books that you don't know about them. People don't talk about them, but once you get them, you say, "Oh man, what have you been until now?" They are super useful books because, as you can see, I'm bringing this plate as an example. You have a diagram showing different arrangements of islands. And obviously, I mean, in the page adjacent to it is explaining you how the stream of the rivers are going to help you to shape the island and etc. So it's very interesting. Gives you some types and gives you some ideas of what advantages and disadvantages of all those types, which normally you don't find in other books. And that this is the typical thing. Sometimes people are like, oh, how do I do this? These sort of books are the books that explain you how to do it. This other one is a very short one, but very interesting because it's giving you a lot of case studies. Very small, very straightforward, but very, very interesting. For example, this is a park in front of a factory. So looks like contradictory, no? But why not? The factories, all that area that are highly polluting, they need some landscape around, and this could be something that you could use as inspiration if you need to design or you need to counter propose or to act around industrial estates, which normally nowadays are surrounded by parks. So this is the idea that you could apply to the park. I'm bringing two French books. There are plenty of them, but obviously because the audience here is normally is English speaking, I don't bring many French books, but this one is a bit like the book that I have just quoted. This gives you a lot of practical results. And if you look for this book, this is not available at archive.org, this is available at Gallica, at the National Library of France. If you look for this book, more like this will appear, and you will find them very interesting because they have a lot of little case studies, little examples. It's perfect to understand the design of the romantic garden, where, as I was saying, you have like a very capricious setting, but at the same time you have some formal here and here, very formal structured areas. And the last one, this is from Forestier. This is very interesting because it's called Great Villages and Systems of Parks. So this is talking about how the parks in the city should be. So this is very, very interesting to take a look at it. It's very short and easy to read. You will need to read it in French, but you can, I think nowadays, if you download it and pass it through Google Translate, it will convert it to you to in your language. So there is no reason to, at least to understand what he wants to say. Maybe the language and the literature is not the better, but it's important in this case. We're architects. We're not talking about literature or translation, so it will be good enough for you to understand what he says. And then last but not least, this book is Léa Dutrelager. Is one of the multiple books that you can find to design trellis. So design trellis normally is trellis are all these panel that have like a grid of sticks, and then they can get different designs, but you need to know how to design them, and this book will help you how to do it, because once you go out of the standard design that you can buy off the shelf, they have to be done bespoke. They can be done by any carpenter. You just need to provide them with the design. So it is good that you keep books like this in mind. There are thousands of them. They are the Trelager. You just find that name in archive.org and you will find much more solutions. But I think that this specific one is very long and you have a lot of examples for you to choose. And we're coming to the end. I'm going to do the usual miscellanea of announcements that I do. And I have a special one to do today. Many of you may know Ruben Hansen from the Aesthetic City. And in collaboration with many others, Ruben has launched the Aesthetic City Academy, which is a very interesting site where he's organizing a course on urbanism and good architecture that is very interesting for the beginners level and will also provide you with all the knowledge bases that you need to know if you want to apply for our courses at the CPI. So we have a special relationship with them, and we are encouraging everyone to do the courses of the Aesthetic City. And also, just for you, one of the people behind Bad Urban, whom many of you may know, he's offering an 11% discount with the code BART11. And these are the chapters that you will have with Aesthetic City. Understanding the cities past to the present, timeless principles of urban design, traditional architecture, core city elements, and next steps. So it's a very good course, and I encourage you to take a look at it, and we can discuss what you think about it once you do it. But if not, you don't want to do that, we are about to finish as well our year one 2025. We will finish on the 27th of 21st of July. That will be our last class, but we are open, we're accepting new applicants for our next year one. So please, if you're interested, contact me and we will be more than happy to explain you about the course. This is what you will see when you are doing the course. This is me teaching you online how to draw the Corinthian order. This is what you see after a class of 5 hours. That time flies. Don't think that it's a hard class. Time flies, and sometimes people want to do more after the 5 hours. And as I normally say, follow your local chapter of INBOW or subscribe to the Classic Planning Institute for more information. And we are going to have on the 18th of September, Thursday, 18th of September, pin the date, I will send the invitation very shortly. We are going to have a public exhibition of all our students' work. That is going to be a virtual exhibition, so everyone is invited to come and see what the students are doing. They will show their work to a selected jury of 5 professionals. We are still asking and conforming the jury, but that will be published beforehand. So you will also have the opportunity of seeing those people giving feedback to the students. But yeah, and here you can see, I mean, some of these people have never taken a pencil, and none of them knew, because some of them had used pencil before, had knew how to draw, but none of them knew about classical architecture. So they learned to do all those drawings, all those design after doing the course with us, and myself being with the white, telling them to work farther and better, taking the best of them, and you can see that the results speak by themselves. But yeah, the exhibition online is open in September. And now, any questions? Any comments? Anything to say? Have you enjoyed it? Didn't you like it? No, not everyone. Felix, you're muted if you're trying to talk.
Well, I could ask one more question, maybe.
Yes, you can ask.
What date did you say in September for the virtual?
The exhibition is going to be, let me just double check, is going to be on the Thursday, 18th of September.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you are in the group, and we will put that in the WhatsApp group. We will send a formal invitation, but save the date for that.
Yes, of course.
And then, I mean, I hope that you will like it. But basically, now we are Alvaro and me are taking a break, thinking about new contents for September, and we're going to make a questionnaire open to everyone so that you can decide and you can tell us what you would like to see in September. From September to December, we will have a very short second season, and then we will come with a longer third season from January to June 2026. That will be
Okay.
That will be the next program. And we are open. We don't know what we're going to do. And we know that we want to continue educating people and helping people improve their designs. We might insist more if people want to bring designs. We might open like a small design atelier, or if there is no intention, we will carry on with lectures and debates. I want to make the second part of the year a bit more with debates, and we will give you texts, you read them, and then we discuss it in class. Any more question? Don't be shy. Okay. If you're going to be shy, I mean, I'm happy to carry on with discussions on offline, because you know that normally I I answer all the emails. You have my email here. If you are watching us on the recording on YouTube, you know that we have a WhatsApp group that I encourage all of you to join. I think all of you already are in our WhatsApp group. If not, just send me a text and I will add you. And we normally have offline discussions there that sometimes become a bit heated, other times they don't. But you are very welcome to join. Last chance to make any question.
I don't really know what to ask. I'm so new to this, so I'm
Okay,
just hanging on to it.
okay, Lara. What is the difference between my Salon and the GR1 and the GR2? Okay, in the Salon we're giving you basic information. In the GR1, we are actually telling you how to do it. What I'm telling you here is read this book and do it. If you have any problem, solve it by yourself. But there in the academy, we will teach you. So you have in here from the beginning. You remember the day we were talking about the orders. We will teach you how to draw the orders. We will teach you how to draw pediments. We will teach you how to draw arcades, balustrades. So you can see here, if I am coming back, I mean, and we will show you how to incorporate all those elements in a design. First, you will design a gate, and then you will design a pavilion, so that you can incorporate all that in a design. You can see a mix of designs here of mostly gates and some pavilions of it. And then if we go back, this is what you will learn to draw. You will learn to draw the full three orders: the Doric, the Ionic, and the Corinthian. You will learn to draw elements of classical architecture, which is the pedestal, the the pediment, the balustrade, and the arcade. All those elements to be able to design a small gate, as well as some concepts on composition. But all that takes time. You know that these sessions are relatively long, but the sessions at the Classic Planning Institute, they're even longer. To draw that illustration that you see there about the Corinthian order takes 5 hours for me to explain to you and you to draw it after I explain, because we go hand by hand. I will be drawing it online, and then you will be in your house repeating what I am telling you. And then you will tell me, "Oh, Pablo, sorry, I don't, I have got lost at some point." And then, okay, send me a picture. We will see in our WhatsApp group, because we have a dedicated WhatsApp group for the Classic Planning Academy. And then I will explain you, okay, what happens here is that you haven't drawn the modillion correctly. You haven't drawn this properly, which you know that we don't do here. I mean, we have the critique. We have people who already know about classical architecture. They're coming for a much higher elevated design. For example, Francisco has been showing us his wonderful building in Bogota, but Francisco knows a lot of classical architecture. He doesn't need to know the basics. This course is for people who want to know the basics. So this is a pre-entry level as well for those who want to do our course. But our course is a fully hands-on. So it's not about you sitting down and listening. It's about you sitting down and drawing. That's the difference. It's not. It's there will be lectures. There will be a lot of speakers coming because you might say, yeah, the salon is only you. Of course, it's only me because this is free. If I want to bring speakers, I need to pay them, and this is operated for free. I'm not charging anything. I don't have money to bring the speakers. So that's what I wanted you to see. I mean, that's the difference. You will have here it's me talking and lecturing about some aspects of architecture, but the course in the Classic Planning Academy is for you to learn how to design. And I will be there teaching you how to design all the elements and all the orders. You are very welcome. But thank you for asking because I mean I think it's good that you are aware that I mean this is just the starters. The main menu it's in the course that you will be doing with us if you join. And I know that some of you, because I have received applications from some of you, and some of you have been admitted, some of you have been we're still processing them, but you are very welcome to join. I'm happy that you have enjoyed, Nicole. I think that some classes they bring more debate because they might be more heated. And we decided to end up with landscape because it's something that you hardly talk about, but obviously it's not a very heated debate theme. So what are we going to argue? Do you like roses or carnations? So that's a bit the problem. No? We all like, or if you don't know much about capability Brown, there is not much that we can discuss. That's a bit the theme. But I mean, if you have any other question, it doesn't have related with to be related with the lecture, but related to classical architecture that you want to ask, and that goes to any of you, please do and ask. Perfect. Well,
No, oh,
yes,
sorry. Can I
Helnico.
ask you how long have you been into classical architecture, and how did you come to be interested in it?
Oof. I think that since I was a child. I think that since I was a child, I had that thing. I remember one of my favorite cartoon movies was Asterix and Cleopatra. And if you have watched the movie, you know what the movie is about, do you?
Unfortunately, I haven't, but
Okay, so but you know Asterix, no? Asterix and Obelix.
yes, of course.
So in this movie, there is an architect from Alexandria, from Egypt, called Numerobis, who goes to the Gauls village and asks them for help because he's a very bad architect, and Cleopatra has asked him to build a palace for her in 3 months. So he goes to ask the help of Asterix, and then the whole movie is about building the palace. And obviously, I mean that's when you're a child and you like that, you are into that. I remember that, so I think that since I was a child, I like all the part of architecture. I remember watching The Beauty and the Beast. To me, my favorite scene is the final one. Sorry for the spoiler, but at this stage, I think that everyone must have seen or should have watched The Beauty and the Beast, the cartoon movie. That wonderful scene when the neo-Gothic castle becomes neoclassical. So people would say the dancing, the this, that to me was boom. The moment the neo-Gothic turns into neoclassical, that was wow. That was my favorite part. So I think that and because that was coming with the thing of wanting to be an architect. I always wanted to be an architect, and I always had a passion for classical architecture because being from southern Spain, that's a lot of what you see around. So I was living in the city center, so I was always seeing um, classical architecture. I was going to the beach close to the Roman ruins of Bailo Claudia. So I was at the beach playing, and then in the background you could see the columns of the forum and the buildings. So it was always part of my surroundings. So to me, it was like a natural thing to do. It was my natural step to become classical. And then obviously at university, I discovered that wasn't the way. And I always tell the same story. I remember my first class ever at university was history. So we started with 18th century. Oh, so fun, soufflot, Jean-Jacques Gabriel, Juan de Villanueva, Manuel de Tolsa, Ledoux, Boulez, Schinkel. I'm loving this. This is for me second class of history because the other professors didn't talk about history. It was only history, no? In analysis, they were taking us to measure a staircase, to draw this, to draw that, and you were doing excited because you didn't know anything. So draw a staircase. It's like, no, you need to draw it, but this is not about drawing the staircase. It's about drawing the staircase architecturally. Then in construction, we'll be talking about materials, and then second class of history. And then we were talking about the Crystal Palace, Gustav Eiffel. Oh, this is super fun. I like this. Third one, Gaudí. Fourth one, Le Corbusier. Okay, something is going on. Fifth one, Miss Van der Rohe. Frank, you're right. And then more and more and more, I said, no, I want to go back to neoclassical. That's when I was having the fun. Why can't I come back there? Then no, you have to be modern, blah blah blah. And then yeah, then I realized that I didn't like the modernist, but I had to deal with that. What do you think about architecture composition of Nathaniel Curtis? I'm going to check because I need to I need to ensure that I know which book you're talking about. I'm checking it, my dear. Hey, it was dedicated to William Ware. I mean, I have never seen it, but back in that time, they were doing a lot of books on that case, and considering that it's a disciple of William Ware, it must be a good book. I'm taking a look at. I'm just flicking through the pages because I see a lot of illustrations, dual character of architecture, fundamental aesthetic laws, and then you will be probably having the illustrations. Yeah, it's a good book. I have never used it, but I mean, from what I see, just flicking through, is a good source. You have a lot of them from that period. So, for example, one I use a lot is this little one, The Principles of Architectural Composition by Howard Robertson. Oh, it's shown the other way around, but I will send you the link. This is very good. I use a lot elements of form and design in classical architecture by Arthur Stratton, and the principle. This one is very good as well. Introduction to Architectural Design by Donald Atkinson Fletcher. That's very good as well. And Harbison. And this one, which is The Study of Architectural Design by John Harbison, which is very good to learn how to do the analytic. So I would say that your book is as good as mine. So learn a lot from it and use it wisely. That would be my advice. Because there is a lot of them. A lot of those books were published at the beginning of 20th century. And nowadays, because we have access to all of them at the same time, we don't realize that these books, they were written 10 times, or 10 people were writing about the same thing, because you were printing the books, and once the books were sold, there was no other way of accessing them. So someone would see the opportunity and would write something similar. So that's why you have a lot of them on the same subject around the same time, and all around the United States, because they were in the United States. Happened something from the 1870s, 1880s, is that the American architects go to Paris, they got mesmerized with what they see in the École des Beaux-Arts, and then they want to replicate it in the United States. But what they didn't realize is that the system that was functioning in the École des Beaux-Arts was a chaos. But there is an order within the chaos. Which order, you don't know, but there is an order. If you know, you know. That's a bit the thing, no? It's like, but then because they didn't know, they had to figure out by themselves. So that's why they had to publish so many things, because and at the same time they help us future generations to understand architecture much better than in France, where the moment that the atelier system disappeared and the École des Beaux-Arts become modernist, the knowledge disappears because there is no book holding it. While in the United States, that could be restored back with some flaws, with some problems, but it could. I mean, the problem of these American architects is basically that they shouldn't have looked at the École des Beaux-Arts. They should have looked at the École Polytechnique, which has its own method. We had Durand and Blondel and Normand and many others that, because they were all from the Polytechnic, the guys from the École des Beaux-Arts would never use, because those are the Polytechnic. So that's a bit the story. It's a very fascinating story about what happened in the United States with classical architecture, because it was only in the United States. The whole America, the rest of America, from Mexico downwards, was taking the model normally from the Polytechnic. The only ones who took the model from the Beaux-Arts were the Americans. Everyone else took the model from the Polytechnic, which was because it was the practical mode. So if you need to form the elites in building and doing something, you send them to the Polytechnic. The École des Beaux-Arts was for the children of the rich and the bohemian artist. But hey, it was much more attractive to talk about the École des Beaux-Arts with all that chaotic creativity than the very ordered boom, 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 boom way of doing things of the Polytechnic. But the thing is that at the end, the Americans wanting to emulate the École des Beaux-Arts, the only thing they were capable, the only thing they got close to was a bad model of the Polytechnic with a twisted thing on the atelier system, because in France they were relying on the atelier system because the younger would learn from the older, but these ateliers were don't they didn't have any commercial purpose. I mean, I think the only ones who nowadays are doing that are the guys in Norway with the Acanthus organization, are the only ones that are keeping the spirit of that French atelier. In the United States, it was a source of cheap labor, because people will go to the atelier, and then because they were in the atelier and they were learning, they would earn very little, but they would be kept in the atelier forever, 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 until they were capable of opening their own firm. So it was a system that the moment that when Gropius arrives to Harvard and declares the end of the atelier system, everyone received it very happily, unfortunately. And he said he cancels the atelier system and he proclaims the democratic workshop. Who isn't going to like that? So that's why the words and the terms are very important. Any more questions, gentlemen and ladies? Okay, so I wish all of you a very good summer. We will stay in touch in the different groups, because I know some of you from the Brazilian group. I know some of you from our own group. Some of you are in both groups, but we will be having that. We will be sharing resources. We will be keeping the debates updated, but we will come in September. We will send very soon the invitation, and something that I would like all of you, those including who are watching this recording, you can participate, because we will put the link on the YouTube page as well. It's a form for you to fill, where we will be asking you some questions about what you think about all these 12 lectures that we have had since the first one we did in January about the aesthetic movement, what you have liked of them, what you will want to see more of the things that you have liked, and what is something that we haven't done and you would like us to do. And then we will consider all that. But until then, thank you very much and have a lovely summer. We will see all of you in September. Some of you we will be contacting you separately to discuss matters, because we might be able to create an exhibition or something, and then we will contact you people individually if they want to participate. But for sure, we will see all of you on the 18th of September, 5 o'clock BST, for to see what my students at the CPA have been doing. And also you can see what you will learn if you come to our courses. Thank you very much and have a lovely summer. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Pablo.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Pablo.